Both at home and abroad, and out every scabbard that hides a good sword. Our forefathers gave us this freedom in hand, and will die in defense of the rights of the land. Derry down, 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 Derry down, Derry down, 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 Derry down.
Proclamation from the City Council.
The office of City Councilwoman Marlena Rivera, Colonial Dames of America, one of the oldest patriotic societies in the city, dating from 1890, supports the annual Lower Manhattan Historical Association celebration of the American victories at the battles of Saratoga and Yorktown. 3 Revolutionary War heroes, General Horatio Gates, Alexander Hamilton, and Colonel Marinus Willett, all of whom were involved in the battles of Saratoga and Yorktown, are buried in the Trinity Churchyard. By keeping memories of these important battles and the men who fought in them, the LMHA ceremony serves as an important role in preserving and promoting the city's history. We are proud to participate in this ceremony. We also note that the ceremony highlights the importance of the French as America's first ally. With the 200th anniversary of the Marquis de Lafayette's triumphant return to the United States in 1824, approaching in 2024, we believe this aspect of the celebration is particularly important.
First of the American victories was at Saratoga. There were 2 battles of Saratoga. One is known as the Battle of Freeman's Farm, which took place on September 19th, 1777. The second one is the Battle of Bemis Heights, which took place on October 7th, 1777. And General Burgoyne, on behalf of the British, did not surrender for another 10 days until October 17th, 1777. We're going to mention this occasion 4 heroes. We made reference to Horatio Gates before, who was the commanding general of the American forces, and Marinus Willett, who performed some heroic services in connection with the battle of what's called the Battle of Oristany. Both of them played crucial roles in ultimately winning the battles of Saratoga. We're also going to have say a few things about some other people who were active in the battles, Benedict Arnold and Daniel Morgan. Let me call on Jim first to speak on Gates and Willett.
Okay, well, for those of you who were on the tour earlier, I was talking a lot about Gates, but more about Marinus Willett. Willett was a very important military man and politician here in New York City. For 55 years after the so-called Broad Street incident, right before the Battle of Bunker Hill, Willett is the hero of the Battle of Oristany Fort Stanley, which held off the British from attacking General Gates from behind in the Battle of Saratoga, and without which the Battle of Saratoga would never have been won by the Americans. Later was the High Sheriff of New York, was a very important politician, and was one of the founders of the Tammany Society, and ultimately become the New York City Democratic Party. He was an anti-federalist that was defeated by Alexander Hamilton and John Jay in connection with the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. Thus lost power, later came back. His most significant achievement, in my opinion, was that in 1790 he was asked by George Washington to see if he could negotiate a peace treaty with the Creek Indians in the southern United States. Now you have to understand, 1790 was right after the Constitution had been ratified, and the United States government had a big problem. It was headquartered in Forces Tavern, by the way. The problem was that even though the Treaty of Paris gave all property, land east of the Mississippi to the United States, the area that consists significantly was Georgia and Alabama was under the control of the Creek Indians, who had been allied with the British and weren't letting Americans in. In fact, any white man who went into that territory was supposed to be killed. The state of Georgia wanted the American Army to clean out the Creek Indians, but Washington and his President Van Knox knew that we didn't have the power to do it. So the key was going to be able to effect a settlement. Macmillan had had experience with Native Americans in upstate New York for the war, but Washington, in a sense, reached across the aisle to ask him to see if he could, what he could do. He snuck into Creek territory, met with the Creek chief, Alexander McGillivray, and convinced him that he represented the great white father in the United States, who wasn't a very neutral. And he said that you guys should come up to New York City and see how we live, and you're really friendly. You're friendly to Native Americans. So, in fact, the 27 Creek Indians came up, the Appointed Creek chiefs, and they were immediately met by the Tammany Society, which was favorable to Indians and favorable to Indians. And after several meetings and drinks, supposedly, they struck a very favorable treaty to both sides, a very fair treaty, and settled the Creek War. So now Americans could move into the southwestern United States, and the Creeks' rights would be protected. Of course, they weren't years later around Andrew Jackson, but when the Treaty of New York in 1790 was a critical factor to the early United States and a huge diplomatic triumph. Really, that's its negotiation. Now, it is said that at the final meeting, they raised their glass, they had a final toast, and McGillivray said to the willing people, the Tammany Society, I see you men call yourselves the Tammany Society. You should know that it was Chief Tammany of the Delawares who believed that all men of different races could work together, which not all the Indians did, but we believed that it could be. And it was Chief Tammany's dream, even though it wasn't fully implemented, that there would be a city one day where people tried more easily to work together among different races. But that city would be one day the most important, powerful in the world. But and they all raised their glass, and the Tammany Society would continue to grow in importance, and it would rule the city for the next 150 years. You don't believe what they teach you in the history books. The Tammany Society, although it is often stained with corruption, it always bedrock idea was that men of different races and different ethnic groups can work together.
Who was the greatest spy of the American Revolution? Well, William Casey, when he took over the CIA in 1980, wanted to tear down that statue of Nathan Hale, the loser, the clown.
Or go with Hercules Mulligan.
I mean, we got ringers. We know where we're going. I just wanted to get. I'm going to give it emphasis. I'm going to give it emphasis. And he wanted him to be replaced by a statue of. I gave away. That was the $64,000 question. Not every single person in this room knows the name Hercules Mulligan. I'll bet. The greatest spy of the American Revolution, Hercules Mulligan. Nobody is even close. Doesn't even come close to him. Now, Alexander Hamilton grew up in St. Croix and was a clerk in a merchant house. In the merchant house, it had offices in New York and in St. Croix and in London. Hugh Mulligan and Hercules Mulligan both worked for that firm. So how do we know that Alexander Hamilton first set foot in New York City on October 31st, 1772? It wasn't because it was Halloween. The first person to meet him was Hercules Mulligan. He met him, he put it in his diary. He met Alexander Hamilton on October 31st, 1772. Hamilton was penniless. He lived with him before he even went to Elizabeth. He knew him intimately. He was recruited for Hamilton to be a spy. We have records. Again, I'll trust Michael E. Newton. Anybody who knows that knows you don't argue with Michael. You don't argue with him about facts at all. So in Hackensack, in November 1776, Hercules Mulligan officially signs on with George Washington and Alexander Hamilton secretly. We didn't know about this as a spy. Hercules Mulligan is the best tailor in New York City. Hercules Mulligan is the preferred tailor of the entire British High Command. Hercules Mulligan fooled everybody into thinking he was a Tory. So he constantly was overhearing the British talking about what they were going to do to George Washington. You can look in Chernow's book, you can look in Michael Newton's book. Hercules Mulligan is credited with saving George Washington's life at least 3 times. Now in March 1778, he comes in with great intel. Henry Clinton, Commander-in-Chief of the entire British Army, is going to visit one of his many mistresses out in Greenwich Village. He's got nobody with him, no escort, no nothing. We can kill him or capture him. The group probably of about this size and this space. They're all jumping up and down. One person, 21-year-old Alexander Hamilton says, wait, stop. He's the stupidest, most corrupt, most incompetent, woman-obsessed, musician-obsessed commander-in-chief they could possibly have. If we got rid of him, they'd only get somebody better. So, yes, folks, get the joke? We were taught that Yorktown was Cornwallis's fault. It was not Cornwallis's fault. He was one of their best generals. So let's fast forward to September 1781, when Cornwallis is ordered by Henry Clinton to go to Yorktown, to be on the water, to be trapped in a peninsula. And he goes as he's ordered to do. And in September, there are letters back and forth with Cornwallis saying these French and Americans are coming from all over the place. I can't stay here. You got to help me. You got to get me out of here. And Henry Clinton, playing his violin, is saying, oh, don't worry, we'll get around to helping you. We'll get around to helping you. We'll take care of you. Anyway, he did get his relief force together 2 weeks too late. So actually the defeat at Yorktown and many other defeats had more to do with Hercules Mulligan and Alexander Hamilton's spy network than they had to do with and Alexander Hamilton overtly was a hero. That was his big hero. Overtly, we know. The last 2 protective areas were redoubts 9 and 10 at Yorktown. And Hamilton led a bayonet charge with no bullets over open ground to take Redoubt 10 in Yorktown, which he did in 9 minutes with only 9 casualties. That is what he is famous for in Yorktown, and it's heroics as a war hero.
Speaking of Daniel Morgan, so you may know him as immortalized in John Trumbull's 1821 painting in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol, or one of 3 statues in the exterior of the Saratoga Monument, in addition to on the battlefield. Daniel Morgan, as mentioned, was instrumental in the American victory at Saratoga. He's claimed by Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey as a native son. This is a popular guy, and came of age in the Shenandoah Valley. He received his nickname Old Wagoner because of his service as a teamster for the British during the French and Indian War. He was a robust young man, surviving 500 lashes issued as a punishment for striking a British officer, often a fatal sentence. His Revolutionary War service began when he led a company of riflemen, known as Morgan's Riflemen, to reinforce those laying siege into Boston in 1775. The company was heralded for their rifle accuracy and hard-fighting ways. They were also known for their dress. They wore hunting shirts, a distinctly American garment. Before long, the sight of a hunting shirt struck fear into British forces because of these sharpshooters' prowess. Daniel Morgan participated in the campaign to invade Canada in 1775 under Benedict Arnold and took over command when Arnold was injured during the Battle of Quebec. His campaign was unsuccessful, and Morgan, along with 400 other Americans, were captured by the British. He was released several months later as part of a prisoner exchange and returned to fighting as the colonel of the 11th Virginia Regiment. Because he could look beyond the confines of traditional or accepted standards of warfare, Morgan played a pivotal role at the Battle of Saratoga. In charge of a corps of light infantry, he employed tactics designed to unsettle the highly disciplined British troops. His riflemen wreaked havoc on Burgoyne's forces, led by General Fraser, more on him later, at Freeman's Farm, taking out many officers. While Morgan's men were repelled after their charge and needed to be reassembled, their sharpshooters were able to successfully break up the British lines. At the Battle of Bemis Heights, heard about that a moment ago, Saratoga's second engagement, Morgan and his men confronted General Fraser once more. Under orders from Arnold, one of Morgan's marksmen took out General Fraser, and the British army fell back. Morgan and Arnold attacked Burgoyne, who was forced to fall back to Saratoga. Morgan's men continued to pick off patrols, making Burgoyne's escape nearly impossible, leading to the British surrender. He briefly retired, driven by dissatisfaction with the leadership of the army and the feeling that he was repeatedly passed over in favor of less qualified men. He was called back into service and led a successful campaign at the Battle of Cowpens, displaying exemplary tactical skill against his British adversary, Bannister Tarleton. You may know him as the inspiration behind Colonel Tavington in the 2000 film, The Patriot. You'll have to do your own research for this brilliant campaign, but know that Morgan was awarded the gold medal in 1790 by the U.S. Congress for his service. He retired as a brigadier general after 6.5 years of service, called back in once more during the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794, and served one term in the House of Representatives, but otherwise spent most of his retirement in Virginia. He died in 1802.
Great to have our French allies here representing both the Navy and the Army and the Armed Forces of France. You've heard about how France had supplied material assistance to America prior to Saratoga, but as Terry mentioned, it was Saratoga that really galvanized the Treaty of Alliance, the formal alliance, and Rochambeau brought his professional troops to Rhode Island initially, and then joined Washington in New York. And of course, it was Yorktown where we saw, in effect, a combined arms operation in place, with the Navy defeating the French Navy, defeating the English Navy, and laying the groundwork for the Americans and the French to force Cornwallis into his capitulation. And as I understand it, while it was Hamilton who took redoubt number 10, the French who took redoubt number 9. So they deserved a very significant portion of the credit for that great victory. In this cemetery, one of the French participants in the siege of Yorktown is buried, Stephen Rochefontaine. He came to America in 1778. He joined the Continental Army. He became a captain in the Corps of Engineers. Years later, in 1795, Rochefontaine started a military school at West Point. We are pleased that we can honor his memory as well as the American and French alliance here at St. Paul's Chapel and in this cemetery and churchyard. The American-French alliance has continued. We fought side by side in World Wars, World War I, World War II, and that alliance continues in NATO today. So thank you to the French Navy and Army representatives here. We are so delighted to have you. I might also add a word of thanks. We are the Sons of the Revolution, but we have representatives of the Daughters of the American Revolution here. A number of members of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Elise Richardson, who you've heard from, Regent of the New York City chapter, and Melinda Allison is the Vice Regent of the Fort Greene chapter. So thank you to all of the Daughters of the American Revolution who have joined us today.
I'm the president of the American Society of Le Souvenir Français. Our main mission is to pay tribute and honor the soldiers, sailors, aviators who are buried in the United States. That's our first mission. Some 2,000 graves from Newport, Rhode Island, to Yorktown, Savannah. Sailors from World War I in Queens. Cadets, Air Force cadets who crashed while training in Alabama, World War II, Michigan. they all deserve to be recognized, and their memory needs to be honored. We also have some French soldiers and officers at Arlington Cemetery. The second mission is a little bit of history, because you cannot honor the dead if you don't tell their story. And the history between France and the United States is very unique. You have other chapters of the Souvenir Français in different countries, in China, in Russia, in Africa, in Europe. But in every instance, those soldiers fought against, or they were buried in battle from Moscow to China and Vietnam. Here it's different. They all died for the same cause of freedom and liberty. And when France signed the Treaty of Alliance and Friendship on February 6, 1778, France was the first nation to recognize the independence of the United States. In fact, George Washington was so elated when he heard the news that the treaty was signed on May 4th, it took 2 months for the news to reach Congress. He issued an ordinance, a decree, asking for Mass to be said in perpetuity. And if you ever go to Valley Forge in the George Washington Chapel, the first Sunday of every May, you have a Mass in honor of thank France. All this because of George Washington. But when King Louis XVI sent an army, 6,000 strong, to Newport under Russian rule, he was a professional soldier. He had experience for the siege, and the siege, his experience proved very valuable a few months later in Yorktown. And the French army walked from Newport to Rhode Island, stayed 30 miles from here, no one knows, but there is a farm called the Odell House in Yonkers that the city of Newburgh just bought, and the farm is pretty much intact, and it's being under renovation right now. It's going to be a museum. And our society just found out that you have 4 French soldiers who are buried in the garden, so we will erect a memorial for this. And then they combined forces with the American army, walked all the way to Yorktown, and pretended that they were attacking New York, and Clinton, when he realized he was duped, it was too late, the troops. So de Grasse never set foot in the United States. He stayed on his ship. But if you go to Yorktown, you will see the and Yorktown itself, of course, I was at the ceremony at the French cemetery. You have 50 unknown soldiers, sailors who are buried in not far from George Washington's headquarters. We also pay tribute to the French memorial with all the names of the French soldiers and sailors. So that's what we do. And it's always a great honor to be standing by your side and to pay tribute to this long history that at times is forgotten. But in the history of nations, you don't have 2 countries that have never been at war, always fighting side by side. It's a fact. Between France and the United States, it's always been friendship from day one. And all the soldiers who died for the cause of freedom are here to remind us of the importance of this mission. Thank you very much.
Our program. Thank you everybody for coming and participating and doing honor to the history and stories and the great patriots. Yeah.